Hello and welcome to my video reflection, using the Assure model to teach students about copyright. For this assignment, I chose to push myself out of my comfort zone and focus on creating a lesson for middle school students. My professional experience up until this point includes students from infancy through fourth grade, with very little experience with children in the preteen or teen years. The copyright lesson that I developed includes three main learning activities for the students: a video lesson about copyright, virtual copyright scenarios shared via Padlet, and an interactive discussion board. All three components will be shared via a web page designed specifically for this assignment and shared via the library course in the district's learning management system. The first step in the Assure model is to analyze the students in the class to identify and support the various learning needs of those students. And so, as I analyzed Mrs. Stewart's class, these are the things that I noticed. First, this copyright lesson is designed for middle school students, grades 6 through 8, in a Title I suburban school. The students have previous experience participating in digital lessons provided by the library in the school's LMS library course. And as such, most students have access to and practice using technology tools such as Padlet, Flipgrid, and Microsoft Office software. The general characteristics of Mrs. Stewart's class include an even mix of male and female students with a diverse mix of cultural and racial identities. Mrs. Stewart is one of the campus's designated ELL teachers and has several intermediate and advanced Spanish speaking students in her class. Mrs. Stewart also has one autistic student and two students with an SLD in reading, specific learning disability in reading. In order to provide differentiation for the diverse needs of the students in our classroom, I will make sure that I enable the text to speech supports embedded within the Schoology learning management system for the struggling readers. So the video tutorial is obviously going to be presented orally for those students. However, some of the things in Padlet and on the online discussion board, as well as the general instructions for the lesson, I will make sure that I've enabled text to speech for those students. Content language supports, such as vocabulary supports, will be enabled to support the English language learners. Content language supports are available as a STAR accommodation for students who are English language learners. And so I want the students to be able to have access using those tools as we're going. Specifically for her kiddos, because they do speak relatively decent English, they mostly need vocabulary support. Also, the open-ended nature of the lesson is going to support critical thinking for struggling students and high achievers. So I tried to embed as many open-ended activities, such as in the Padlet lessons, they have to analyze the use of materials to see if they were used appropriately or if they violate copyright, and then they post their response with a justification. So therefore the struggling students, they can post something that's within their needs, whereas the high achievers can really dig in deep and express themselves. Same thing with the online interactive discussion board. And multiple modalities will be used to support learning preferences of students, including audiovisual, reading, writing options, as well as hands-on practice. The next step in the Assure model is to clearly establish and share the standards and objectives that are driving the lesson. For this copyright lesson, we have two objectives. The first objective is the middle school learner will demonstrate a basic understanding of copyright laws by correctly identifying and justifying appropriate and inappropriate use of intellectual property in virtual scenarios. The second objective is that this middle school learner will demonstrate an understanding of the consequences of copyright infringement by clearly articulating how this act can affect the creator of the work, as well as the community in a detailed online discussion post. There are numerous TEKS and library standards that could support this lesson. I just picked out a couple of the more obvious ones. For AASL, we do have B6, 1, and 2, where, and in the TEKS, we have 712G and 712I. And basically, these are standards that discuss the ways in which we support students as they learn how to use intellectual property in an ethically and excuse me, I apologize, in an ethical and responsible manner. So basically, we want to teach them that this is not their property, and we do need to hold other people's work in high regard. And this is one way that we do it by respecting their copyright laws. The third step in the Assure model is to select the teaching strategies and resources that will best support learning for the students in the class. You don't want to just throw in random technology tools just because of the bells and whistles. That doesn't help kids learn. So, the way that I am purposefully using my resources to support learning is that the copyright lesson will be published to the middle school libraries course in the school's district management learning management system, excuse me. This will allow Mrs. Stewart and her students the ability to access the content in a time and manner that best fits their schedules. It will also be made available to other teachers who may be interested in teaching their students about copyright. So basically, I'll create the lesson, I will post it onto the Schoology learning management system for the students and teachers to access, and then they can access it when they need it. This way, Mrs. Stewart is able to work through the components at a time that fits her schedule, or even maybe assign it as homework for her students. The technology resources that we will be using, the primary lesson will utilize Screencast-O-Matic and YouTube to present the video lesson, and of course the Canva presentation tool to support student engagement. We'll also be using virtual scenarios that will be presented via Padlet. The scenarios will be presented in a variety of audio, visual, and text-based formats. So there'll be some videos for them to watch and kind of figure out what's going on. There'll be some paragraphs that they have to read, things like that. I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit so that we can address all the different learning styles. The online discussion board will be created via the posting app embedded within the district LMS. It's a pretty great tool. And then all lesson materials will be organized on a web page specifically created within the LMS for the copyright lesson. So it won't be mixed in with a bunch of things. It'll be one web page just for the copyright lesson. Ooh, this one's long. It says the U in the Assure model refers to how the resources will be utilized. This involves previewing the resources, preparing the resources for student use, preparing the learning environment so it supports the use of those resources, and preparing the students to be able to use those tools to the best of their ability. Finally, the lesson will be provided to the students. So, as far as previewing, I've used these tools in the past. I know how they work. I know some of the kind of technical glitches that come with that. Obviously, you do need to sit down and prepare the lesson. You have to create the slideshow that you're going to use. And so that's already been done and prepared. And now we'll also need to prepare the 5 virtual scenarios for the students. I need to make sure all that's ready to go for them. Again, I'm going for the learning environment. It is going to be an online learning environment so that they can complete the lesson at their own pace or at their teacher's pace. And so I'm going to create a user-friendly web page for them that's easy to follow and sequential for the students. As far as preparing the students, I reviewed Mrs. Stewart's classroom list to ensure that all of her students were enrolled in the appropriate library course so that they can actually access materials. I have to make sure that the students are enrolled in the class so that they can access the tools. And then, of course, clear instructions will be provided on how to complete the activity. And then the lesson is currently available for the teachers and students to use when they are ready. The Assure model also requires that students actively participate in the learning activity by using the resources embedded with the lesson. And so the copyright lesson requires student participation in 2 main ways. First, the Padlet participation. Students will participate in the Padlet activity by posting responses to 5 virtual scenarios. And then they have to justify. They can't just say, yes, it was appropriate. No, it wasn't appropriate. They have to justify those choices by explaining their understanding of copyright. The second way that it is going to require learner participation is through the interactive discussion board. Students are going to be required to respond to a two-part discussion prompt via the Schoology discussion board, and then they have to turn around and respond to three of their peers with a nice detailed response. Finally, the LMS does allow for teachers to require the sequential completion of activities within a lesson. It's one of my favorite parts of the Schoology LMS. So when the kids go to the web page, they're going to see the components listed out, but they won't be able to just jump ahead and go into Padlet or jump ahead and go into the discussion board. Instead, this they'll have to preview the video first, and once they do that, it will unlock the Padlet activity. Once they complete that, it will unlock the online discussion post. So that's another way of requiring the students to participate because it ensures that they actually watch the video. And last but not least, the Assure model asks that educators evaluate student learning as a way to monitor and adjust the quality of the instruction and the lessons. And so, as a librarian, there's a few ways I can evaluate this lesson to see if it was effective or not, to see if it actually achieved the goals that I had in mind. First, it's going to be through student evaluation. So, student learning and participation, I apologize, will be evaluated using a student rubric that will be posted on the lesson webpage. So, the students will see the rubric ahead of time to know what I'm expecting of them. And then the teacher and I will complete the rubric and we'll be able to kind of see, okay, were there any learning gaps and where did those learning gaps occur? And where do I need to adjust my lesson for the future to make sure those learning gaps are fixed? Finally, there's also going to be a lesson evaluation where I evaluate the lesson itself. So students' responses to the Padlet virtual scenarios and the discussion board will be analyzed to determine the level of student understanding after participating in the lesson. And then adjustments to the lesson will be made accordingly. And I'm also going to look at teacher feedback regarding how the copyright lesson helped the students to appropriately interact with intellectual property in an authentic way. That's a mouthful. I'm just gonna say it. Basically, I'm gonna ask the teachers, okay, now that they've had this lesson and now that they're applying it to their learning in your classroom for your activity, how well did that information transfer? How well did that knowledge and learning transfer over? Were they able to demonstrate an understanding of copyright or were they not able to demonstrate an understanding? And if they weren't, where are some of the gaps and where do we think that the lesson may have been lacking to help them transfer that knowledge into the real world situations? Because what is the point of having a lesson like this if they can't turn around and apply it, right? So we definitely want to make sure that we are looking at that. And as a librarian, you really want to talk to the teachers. They know those kids better than we do. And so I want to ask them, hey, did this really help you? Was this a practical lesson for you? And then our goals. I'm hopeful that the copyright lesson presented to Mrs. Stewart's middle school students will be engaging, informative, and thought provoking. My overall goal is for students to come away from the lesson with a greater sense of empathy and respect for the works of others, and that the works that others have chosen to share with the world. I think that the big part of copyright is understanding that that is somebody else's work and to just kind of care about the effort that that creator put into establishing and sharing that work with us. And that is the end of my lesson. Not my lesson, excuse me, my reflection. Thank you very, very much. And I did want to share a quote with you. It says, the only thing that you absolutely have to know is the location of the library by the wonderful, wonderful Albert Einstein. That's such a great quote for what we are doing today. You have a fabulous day. Thank you so much for listening to my reflection, and I look forward to working with you again. Bye.